Hello, everyone. My name is Gitika Gorthy, and today I'm very excited and honored to be interviewing a very special space champion, Dr. Tiffany Vora. In addition to working as a founder and co-founder, Dr. Vora is currently the Vice Chair of Digital Biology and Medicine at Singularity University and faculty at the Disruptive Tech Program at Tech University, both in the heart of Silicon Valley. Dr. Vora is also a non-resident fellow at the GeoTech Center for the Atlantic Council. Furthermore, Dr. Vora is working to amplify the impact of women leaders in STEM through the Homeward Bound initiative and is fostering global conversations about humanity's future with humanity in Deep Space and ExploreMars, where she is currently a board member and vice president of innovation partnerships. On top of all of that, she serves as an industry advisory board member of at Lifespan.io, focusing on longer and healthier lives. Dr. Vora and I share a similar background in biomedical engineering, and when I saw she was involved in the space industry and the work that she was doing with DEI in space, I was immediately like, we connected on so many different levels. So I am very excited and honored really to be interviewing Dr. Vora today about how she found her space in this growing space economy. So welcome, Dr. Vora. Thank you so much for taking your time to do this interview. I am honestly so excited to talk all about your journey and learn about your trip to Antarctica. So welcome.
I'm totally excited to be here with you. I love this community that you guys have here. Put it together. It's fantastic. I think people are really what's going to build our future together. And so I'm thrilled to be here. Let's talk.
Thank you so much. Yes, I have to kick off this interview. I saw your LinkedIn posts about your trip to Antarctica with the Homeward Bound initiative. And so could you tell us a little bit more about what was this experience like? Was it your first time in Antarctica? And what was the mission behind going and having this experience?
Absolutely. So I actually just got home about 4 days ago. So I'm still pretty high off of this amazing journey. So yes, I went down to Antarctica as part of the Homeward Bound initiative. This is a multi-year initiative whose mission is to get women and non-binary people with STEM backgrounds into leadership positions all over the world with the view of being able to take climate action at all levels, whether it's in industry, academia, government, NGOs, startups, Fortune 500 companies, everywhere. The idea is let's get more STEM women into positions of leadership so that we can make these decisions together. So I applied to that program back in 2020, about 5 minutes after the pandemic started. I remember I was about to go on to a webinar that had 24,000 people in the audience. And I thought to myself, well, I've already got my makeup on, so why don't I shoot my application video? So I shot my application video that day. That's why I can remember it so clearly. I was admitted to the program, which was great. And then I did the online leadership program in 2021 with about 100 other women from all around the world. Only a handful of us were American, which I thought was great. And we had representation from many other countries as well. And then what usually happens at the end of the program is that all the women and non-binary people get together on a ship, go down to Antarctica, meet the climate scientists, figure out how can we have impact around the world to start turning the tide against climate change. But of course, 2021 wasn't a good time for international travel, neither was 2022. And so 2023 was finally the time I finally got to go. So you asked, was this my first time in Antarctica? The answer is yes. But actually, I've been to the very high Canadian Arctic, not too far from the North Pole, as part of a Mars simulation, which I'm sure we're going to want to talk about. But so I have for 20 years now been really interested in getting south, getting to Antarctica. But I knew that I didn't want to only go as a tourist. I wanted to go as a scientist, and I wanted there to be a larger purpose to it. And this program was a wonderful opportunity for that. So I was down there for 3 weeks on a ship with an amazing crew and this community of women and non-binary people. They were spectacular. They came from all over the world, and they were really remarkable people. These are people who run NGOs, are highly placed in government, are highly placed in companies or banks, or are running startups. And everyone was just so keen to be working together to build a better future. I was in heaven. I was absolutely in heaven for 3 weeks. And the reason that I was so excited to be there, one of the many reasons, was A lot of the work that I'm doing right now at ExploreMars is bringing the sustainability and the space communities closer together. So I got onto this ship, first of all, knowing who all the space people on the ship were. So right immediately we formed our space group. And then the second part was, how can I identify women and non-binary people who are working on energy, or working on water, or working on healthcare, or working on food, all sustainable production? Let's pull them into the space community. Because I think that if we're going to be building a sustainable future wherever we call home, we're solving similar problems for space and for Earth. And I would love for that to be a communal effort.
Yeah, I mean, as you were talking, I just had so many points to interject in. I think that was just, first of all, hearing your experience, I can say, like, see how exciting and, happy you are with that, trip, and just seeing, I'm sure the amount of connections and relations you formed through that experience were just for a lifetime. And it's going to create so much impact as you carry forward those connections to working towards the similar goals women and people, individuals of non-binary are feeling around the world and doing around the world. So really, thank you for sharing that experience. One point specifically that you mentioned in the end that I really wanted to emphasize is you said how we're using space to benefit life on Earth, especially when it comes to climate change. I was about to ask you actually, where is the connection between working with climate change and trying to, you're into the space industry, climate change, how do they connect for you? And so hearing you talk about how you want to use space as a industry, as a catalyst towards working towards, overcoming and battling climate change, I think is so powerful. And so how did those conversations go for you when you were talking with individuals who are not directly in the space industry, but were so energy focused or on protecting our planet? How did you open that dialogue? And were they receptive to this type of dialogue with the space industry? Or were they kind of like, oh, this is a territory I'm not comfortable with? What were their reactions?
Well, the first thing I did was get out ahead of that by talking about the question that if I could wave a magic wand, I would never have to answer again. And that question is, why should we spend money on space when we have so many problems on Earth? So that's basically where I started. I was like, look, to me, Mars is not plan B. There's no plan B. There's no planet B. It's this idea that we have to choose between Earth and Mars, or Earth and the moon, or Earth and space. It's a false choice. And I believe that the technologies that we are building today in order to get us to these extreme environments have really useful applications here on Earth. But what that means is we have to be meaningful about making the connections and not letting these walls persist. So I think I was clear in my messaging, which was good. I had worked on it beforehand. So if you want to talk about science communication, we can do that as well. But I think the real key here was that this group came together with a mindset of openness and being receptive to new ideas. I learned about all kinds of things on this ship that I didn't know anything about, that I'm not even sure I would have put my hand up and been like, yeah, you know what? Tell me more about that. But I was on a ship, right? I had nowhere else to go. And I was surrounded by people who were just really fantastic at what they were doing. So my goal was to get us, not just me, but the other women on the ship who were part of the space community, let's have those conversations. Let's raise our voices. Let's bring it up at dinner when everyone's a glass of wine in and a bit relaxed and, talking about the things that really matter to us. Let's do that rather than being worried about pushback. And in this particular community, it worked beautifully. And I have a notebook that I brought back with me from the ship full of notes on all the other women, and being like, okay, when I want to talk to someone about governments and treaties, I know I'm going to go talk to the women who work on the High Seas Treaty and the Antarctic Treaty. Check, I've got them. When I want to talk about renewable energy, I'm going to go talk to this person. So I've got this great list of folks that I'm really excited to go back to as soon as possible to get these conversations going and really try to get the stakeholder community in space much broader, right? The more people we have excited about this future that we're building, the more it's likely that that future will not be a single person's vision, but rather a broader vision. And the more people we get with skin in the game, the more likely this is to happen the way we want it to happen.
Absolutely. Yeah, those are all perfect points. And, I hear this saying a lot, which is like every company is a space company, or every company or every industry has some sort of tangency relationship to the space industry. And so thinking how even with, climate, it's like such a big part of the work even NASA does. So to know that we can start pulling in and collaborating with others who are not traditionally a part of the space industry and helping them realize that there's so many parallels and working together to reach the similar goals we have is so important. It's so amazing. So yes, I 100% agree. Even with the general public, with science communication, a big piece is trying to create that open mindset of being receptive to information and being just receptive to different ideas because you never know how it could align. So really, I'm so glad you had that experience. And you were also mentioning an analog mission that you were a part of near the North Pole. So could you talk a little bit about that and what it's like to be an analog astronaut?
For sure. So I've actually done 3 analog Mars missions.
Oh,
Whenever you're doing an icebreaker, do you ever do 2 truths and a lie? You know that game where
yes,
you're
yes,
right.
yeah.
Okay. So usually with my 2 truths and a lie, one of my truths is I've been to Mars 3 times. And a lot of people just fall right in that hole. They're like, "You've never been to Mars?" I'm like, "I've been 3 times." So yes, so when I was a PhD student at Princeton, I had gotten a book from the library that was called The Case for Mars by Robert Zubrin. And I've got a copy up there on my shelf right behind me. And it was an interesting book because so Bob Zubrin founded the Mars Society, and he wrote this famous book many years ago that was basically saying, look, we all know NASA's vision for going to space. Maybe there's another way. Maybe there's a way to do it cheaper, faster, lighter, live off the land. And I thought, wow, that's like a really provocative idea. I'm going to put that in my head. I actually grew up in Florida in the 1980s, so now everybody knows how old I am. So when I was a little kid, I used to stand in my backyard and watch shuttle launches, right? I grew up seeing the space industry. But then after reading this book in grad school, the last page of the book was an advertisement asking for volunteers to be part of these Mars simulations. And I'll never forget the headline. It said, volunteers wanted hard work, no pay, eternal glory. And I was like, wow, that's me. So I sent my application in, promptly forgot about it. And then a few months later, the phone rang and it was Bob Zubrin calling to ask if I wanted to go, not to the Arctic that first time, but would I go to Utah and help build the biology laboratory? So I went to the Mars Desert Research Station, MDRS. It's still there. Actually, there was a woman on the ship with me who was crew like 285, something like that at MDRS. I was crew 3. I was crew
Wow.
3 and crew 11. So we had a lot of fun talking about how the habitat has changed. So 2 rotations there in the Utah desert. And then I finally got picked to go up to the Arctic for, I want to say it was 5-6 weeks, something like that. Felt like a very long time. So that was, especially the Arctic one. Mars simulations are great. I learned so much from them. I think the most important thing that I learned was that the things that go wrong are not the things that you think are going to go wrong. So it's really important to do these tests so that you find those things out that you wouldn't predict, right? Like we had some pretty fancy machines that we were really happy with. We took them out on our first simulated EVA, and the gloves on our suits were so big you couldn't push the buttons on the machine, right? Like dumb stuff like that. So how did we fix it? We took a pipette tip and we taped the pipette tip to a finger so that you had one sharp finger. But then of course you kept, bumping your face with it. So that's the great part, I think, about simulations. The other really important thing that I learned from simulations is that the hardest technical problem to solve is people. So when I think about the future of space, it's not for me about rockets, it's about people and how you take a small number of people, you align them on a set of goals, you put them under really physiologically stressful conditions, and then you say, okay, good luck, bye. That's a really tough problem. And so and this is what's interesting to me about technology development now versus in 2005 when I was in the Arctic. It's almost 20 years ago now, that a lot of the technology that we take for granted now that helps with human connection and these types of things, we didn't have it. And there are plenty of other places where we have these communities, isolated communities of humans, where we're able to do some experiments and find out like what can really make life better. How do you not just survive, but thrive under those conditions? So I think those are my big takeaways from my Mars analog missions. Totally recommend. Like, try it.
You definitely don't have to recommend it to me. It's definitely already on my bucket list and something I really want to do. I've looked for so many opportunities, and I feel like they're a lot for mostly graduate students and PhD students. There are definitely opportunities for high school and even undergrad if you're a certain age or you have certain expertise for certain types of missions. But I definitely agree. It's been on my bucket list. Every time I see like an analog mission, like apply for this, I'm always looking at the requirements and being like, oh, can I apply for this? Does it fit into my, my interest in space? So really, really, I'm hoping I get to go on an analog mission soon. It's definitely on my bucket list. And hearing your experience, it sounds so wonderful. I think there's so many things we imagine. Oh, what is it like to go to space? What are going to be the most challenging issues that we're going to face up there? And like you mentioned, some of them are the most simple things ever. I remember I was talking with another analog astronaut, and they mentioned that the biggest problem or the biggest conflict they had in their analog mission was about orange juice. They don't
I was
have a
gonna
lot
say
of.
it's food, right? It's
It's food.
definitely food.
It's food. It's you knew it. You knew it. It's food. It's like you don't have a lot of tasty food, but you get like one orange box per like week or something. And one of the analog astronauts, they took the orange juice for themselves, an extra one, and they had this whole conflict, which you wouldn't expect astronauts doing, especially when you think of scientists. So I think it's really amazing to see that dynamic play out on Earth as we prepare to send humans to such isolated places for such a long period of time. So really, it's really cool.
I had a similar experience with
Really.
a banana up at the Arctic. A bush pilot came through our island and landed. So we broke sim. We were like a person. Oh my God. And so we broke sim. He came over to have lunch and he had a banana. And instantly there were 6 pairs of eyes looking at the banana. And he was like, do you want my banana? We were like, yes. And man, there has never been a more precise division of a banana into 6 equal pieces than that exact
Wow.
moment. And that was the best bite of banana I've ever had in my entire life. So there you go.
Yeah. Yeah, and just hearing you talk about these really cool experiences, you are one of the most like energetic, most active individuals that I've met genuinely. Like you are a part of so many different things, but you make time for everything. And so I am just curious, like this definitely means you have so much passion for space, and I can really just see it by the way you're talking about all of the experiences you've been a part of. So I have to ask, what was the aha moment that inspired you to pursue a career in the space sector? You do have a biotech background, and you also did say you grew up in Florida, which is, like a space state, especially where you were from. So what was like the moment that defined you to pursue a career in space, given your biotech background? I'm interested how those two kind of came together, because I feel like when people think of a space career, biomedical engineering is not the first thing that comes to mind. So I'm curious about your journey. How did you get to where you are today?
Yeah, so I read that book when I was getting my PhD at Princeton, did my Mars simulations. I'd actually gotten NASA to fund my PhD research, which was great. So
Wow.
I was also kind of on that radar. But then after I graduated from my PhD program, I stepped away from space for a few years. So I was a professor at the American University in Cairo in Egypt. That was before the revolution, so a while ago now. And then I left Cairo and I moved to Silicon Valley. And I started a company. I had a science writing and editing, a science communication company that I ran for almost 15 years and finally shut down last year. It was time, but that was okay. So I had this entrepreneurship journey. And then I got involved in the innovation ecosystem here in Silicon Valley. And so I was working with, as a subject matter expert for biotech and anything that biotech touches. So food, medicine, materials, synthetic biology, like all these various things. So that was nice because what that meant was I got a breadth of experience on how to use biotech on Earth, right? Super important point. So then the pandemic happened and a lot of things changed. And one day I got a phone call. Now, maybe I think it was a LinkedIn message first. I got a LinkedIn message from a guy who had been a postdoc in a lab that I was briefly in as a graduate student at Princeton. And he was like, hey, Tiffany, it's been a while. Are you still interested in that space stuff? And I was like, hey man, nice to hear from you. Yeah, I still like space. Space is cool. He's like, okay, there's someone I want to introduce you to. And he introduced me to Chris Kimmel, who's the head of humanity in Deep Space, who is one of the co-founders of Space Tango, and who does a lot of work, not just in the space industry, but I would say in thinking about the culture of space. So Humanity in Deep Space is this great organization that assumes, like, let's just assume the tech all works. The rockets are fine, the water's fine, everything's fine. Who do we want to be as people when we get there? And I thought that was fascinating. And so I ended up doing some kind of closed door sessions with them, talking to geneticists and artists and anthropologists and poets and, all kinds of amazing stuff. And it was through them then that I met Chris Carberry from ExploreMars. And so he was in a webinar, I attended a webinar that I was part of, and then gives me an email, hey, Tiffany, we'd love to talk to you at ExploreMars. And I'm like, sure, right? Again, like, it's a pandemic, I'll talk to anybody. And they were great. The ExploreMars team, they're so dedicated. There was so much alignment in our vision of the future of space being about making Earth better. And not just for a small number of people, but for as many people as possible, and welcoming more communities into the space fold. And so I was like, this is it. This is perfect. This is a place for me. So ExploreMars is a nonprofit, which was also a really nice space for me to be working in as well, because I'd come from corporate, I'd come from a startup, like I've had all these various experiences, and then managed to get there. So this was a really nice set of experiences. So I did some volunteer work for ExploreMars, and then they were like, hey, come join our board. And I was like, and then they were like, hey, come be our VP of Innovation Partnerships. And I was like, perfect. So it's been really nice. I would say when I'm functioning as a subject matter expert in space, I am largely functioning still from my biology background, which is great because bio touches everything. But then through my work at the GeoTech Center for the Atlantic Council, where I'm a policy fellow, I've been working strongly with their space team as well, thinking about like, what are the regulations that we have to have in place in order to have a peaceful and prosperous future space economy, space geopolitics. I wrote a report for them last year about how America in particular can be harnessing allied space capabilities. Like, how do we tear down walls so we can really work with our allies and build this future? I wrote the space exploration part of that report, which was, super fun. And the other piece that I've been leaning onto heavily, and so again, since your audience is interested in like, what are the ways that I can get to work on space? Because I live in Silicon Valley, I'm really tightly connected to venture capital and investment. So a few months ago, was invited to a private aerospace and space venture capital event where I got to moderate a panel, but I was in the room with all these folks from the military, from VC, from startups. And it was, well, I'll tell you what was really amazing to me. What was amazing to me, because I was like, man, these guys are going to be fighting, right? Like the moon people are going to be fighting the Mars people. Like it's going to be really spicy. And there were very spicy moments. But what was remarkable was that all these people knew each other. They asked about each other's kids. Hey, how was that thing you were working on? And I had that moment where I remembered that we're all people, right? And we're all people working towards the same goal, different methods, different values, all these things, but everyone was in that room because they believe in this future. Some of them believe enough to place millions of dollars on bets on this. And again, I was like, this is great. This is where I want to be. So that's the great news. If you don't have to just be like wanting to be an astronaut. Most of the people I meet in the space community, tell me what you think, don't ever want to get on a rocket. I'm like, oh, but I'll give you a ticket. And they're like, no, I'm not going. Like, okay, more room for me. I assume you are also a go.
Yes, yes, of course.
More room for us, that's perfect. But remember, the vast majority of people working in space are not going to be going to space, right? I mean, for the foreseeable future. And we're not just talking about engineers. Love engineers, engineers totally important, but we're talking about doctors and people who produce food and nurses and plumbers and electricians and welders and the people who figure out how the cleaning system works. All of this is going to be necessary to build this future. So whatever lights you up, you like robots, there's a space for you in space. You like medical robots, there's still a place for you in space, right? So you don't have to be focused on space from day one, right? I wasn't. But life is long. It's getting longer thanks to good healthcare and taking care of ourselves. And that means there's lots of opportunity for us to have careers in which we follow the opportunities and the interests that we have at this moment, still always aiming for a North Star, but you don't have to take the shortest path to get there, right? There's time. And I would argue that's a great thing, because then you get people with a variety of experiences, a diversity of knowledge, all coming together to work creatively on big problems.
I mean, that was just, and first of all, very, very inspiring. I think a lot of times it's scary for individuals to change industries almost, like focusing so much on one subject and then changing to a different industry and taking that chance, I think is a big thing. And I think your story and the way you handled it and really following your heart and being like, hey, this opportunity sounds like something I really love. It's kind of kindling the passions I had a few years ago. Like, and the fact that you followed it and you just went with it and you built on every opportunity, on every connection, and created those opportunities for yourself, I think is the most inspiring part. I think a lot of times, especially as a student, I think it's so easy to be like, things have to come to me, or if something doesn't work out, I'm not going to do it, or I'm only going to follow the traditional pathway and not combine careers together. And you built up so many skills over the years, from the medical aspect, the biotech standpoint, the communication skills with what you were doing with the magazine and science communication. All of those are various skills, but you brought them together into the space sector with what you're doing now, which I'm sure if you said like 20, 30 years ago, you probably wouldn't have imagined that you would be doing what you are doing now. So it's crazy how that journey went for you, but also how you embrace those new opportunities and changes without being in a one track mindset, which is something I feel like as a student, a lot of times I box myself in and I'm like, I have to do this because it's the only right path that someone did. So I think it's really great to see how you navigated it differently and in your own way, which has made the experience and the journey so much better for you.
Yeah, but let's like peel the layer off the onion for a minute, because I don't want to make anybody think that like I had it all figured out and this was a
Of
magic
course.
journey, right? Like no way. There
Of
were times
course.
where one thing didn't work out, and so I followed another opportunity. Or I'll speak about something that, I'm really lucky in many ways. So I'm married, I have a husband, I have a son. When you have a kid, your appetite for risk tends to go down. But my husband has a very stable job. So there were times where I was able to take a risk on something because I knew we'd still be able to pay our bills. And that is a really privileged position. But what it means is that as well, not only is it a privilege, but it means you got to recognize when you have those moments where you can take a chance, where you can roll the dice, right? So like when I moved to Egypt right after my PhD, everyone thought I was crazy, right? Except my boyfriend at the time, who I eventually married. But, we were like, look, like, what have I got to lose at this point, right? I don't own a house. I don't own a car. I don't have any kids. I've got this really cool opportunity. And when we sat down and made a list of pros and cons about whether to make this decision, we had this whole very meticulous list, right? And we looked at the list and he turned to me and he said, do you want to live the rest of your life wondering what would have happened if you had said yes to this? And I said, no, that's not how I want to live my life. And like that was the decision. So I was able to roll the dice on that. And then we had another rule, because we knew, because of the kind of person that I am, that I could have moved to Egypt and spent every night at home with a book and my cat and been perfectly happy, right? But we said, no, like, you're not changing your whole life and trying this new thing to sit at home and read a book. So the rule was I had to say yes to everything. Anytime was like, hey, Tiffany, do you want to? Yes, that had to be my answer. And so as a result, I did some pretty crazy things. Some things in retrospect, maybe I shouldn't have done, but it all worked out, right? And I met a lot of really interesting people who I'm still close with. Many of them I'm still close with. And so that willingness to say yes, I think, is a really important one. And especially if you're a student and you think, for whatever reason, because of your parents or because of, we get these ideas that there's only one path. And so I'd always love to encourage people, try to make yes your default. There will come a time in your life when you cannot say yes to everything. Absolutely. And it's important to recognize when that moment comes, but don't mistake other moments for that, because there are other moments where you can say yes.
Yeah, I think that's amazing advice. And actually, on that note, my next question was going to be a lot of times we see on LinkedIn or even just with a person's response, like, oh, it seems like they had their whole journey figured out. Even if, of course, there were times you changed your track, there are definitely, when you look on the outside, it seems like everything was perfect. But I'm sure, as you mentioned, there are so many obstacles in everyone's journeys and they can come in so many different ways. And so I'm curious about your journey. Did you have any obstacles? And if so, how are you able to overcome them? I think the overcoming piece is the most difficult one. And so, what advice would you give for anyone at any point of their career, whether it be young or mid career, even just retired now? Like, if they're going through something right now, what would be that advice to overcome whatever difficulty they're facing?
Yeah, so yes, I've definitely faced obstacles. Some of them are ones you can probably predict, right? So I'm a woman. I'm a woman in STEM. Biology historically has been friendlier to women than the other sciences, but I was in a very computational and mathematical type of biology, and so there were so many times when I would look in a room and be the only woman, often the only brown person, not always. There are lots of Indians and other folks, in that community, but often I was the only woman. And I would have these moments where I would think to myself, I was only invited here because I'm a girl, which is, it's horrible, right? No one ever said that to me. I was doing that to myself, and that's terrible. So we talk about imposter syndrome, and imposter syndrome 100% was something that I had. Every day I would wake up for the 6 years I was doing my PhD and expect to see an email in my inbox from the head of our program who's like, "Dear Tiffany, you fooled us this long, but we figured it out. Please pack your things. It's time to go." And of course, that email never came, right? Because I am actually a pretty good scientist. But the truth is, that voice still sometimes pops up in my head where someone will be like, "Oh, you need to talk to this person. He runs this 50,000 person company." And I'm like, why should this person talk to me? Like, they should literally talk to anybody else. But I have to shut that voice up, because that woman is not very nice who lives in my head, and she's wrong. Right? Like, I do have something to offer. Maybe it's not what the person is looking for, but I've got an experience, I've got a voice, and I've got a perspective that maybe will help somebody else shape their perspective. So working on that imposter syndrome bit was a big piece. Now, the good news, and please tell me what your experience is, but what I am seeing now is that we are moving in a direction even more normal to see women in these very high-powered STEM rooms. And that's exactly the way I want it to be. I have a 12-year-old son. My dream is that my son goes to college and has literally no idea what I'm talking about, right? Because it's just normal. Everybody's just there and is welcome. So I think we're moving in that direction. So now you asked me for the advice. My advice is to find someone who you can talk to. So I had a woman who spotted me in graduate school. I was having a lot of anxiety, and I was having anxiety and depression, right, in graduate school. Grad school, super tough. And I just thought I had to tough it out. And she recognized in me what she had gone through. And this was a woman I formerly worked for in a pharmaceutical company. She took me out for lunch one day, took one look at my face, and was like, we got to talk. And I had to just say, "You're right. I need help. Please help me." And she did that. And she was wonderful. And so finding the people who are genuinely willing to help, I find it really hard to ask for help, right? I'm tough. I'm smart. I can handle it. I don't want to bother anybody. But that's not what it's about, right? It doesn't bother me when people ask for help because I care about them. So my advice is, like, put your hand out and just ask. And you don't have to be in crisis, right? It can even be asking for help with something fun. That's a great reason to ask for help. But doing that, and then, because the day will come when you are the person who is taking somebody else's hand and you are the help. That's kind of the phase that I'm in my life right now. So instead of paying it back, pay it forward. That's how we're going to do this. This is how we're going to get through these turbulent times. So I think those are my pieces of advice. Ask for help, say yes, I had a third one, but now I don't remember what it was. It's in there somewhere. The transcript will have it. But there really are good people out there, right? Surround yourself with the good people. It makes a huge difference.
Definitely. I mean, first of all, thank you for sharing that. I think it's so easy. A lot of people have imposter syndrome on so many levels. And as you mentioned, I do think we are doing a better job as a whole of trying to kind of even out the playing field for a lot more individuals, regardless of their backgrounds, of their ages, their, sexual identification. And as a girl myself in Columbia Engineering, it's very exciting to know that the engineering school has almost a 50-50% ratio between females and males. So it's amazing to know that so many schools, so many institutions, so many groups like the Brooke Owens Fellowship are working towards empowering minorities in different STEM subjects, as well as just really any career field. We're starting to help everyone realize that there is a place for them. And even what we're doing with commercial flights. I mean, so many people have said, I didn't know I could become an astronaut, or I didn't know like if that's a realistic career to have as a girl or as someone from the, not in the United States or not in Europe. I didn't know that was something I could dream of. And now we're starting to break that with commercial flights. We still have a long way to go with that, but we are starting to open the doors to a lot more folks who traditionally didn't have access to space or a lot of STEM fields or aerospace careers. So I'm really, really excited for what's to come. If the change in just the past 15-20 years has been so big, I can't imagine how the next 10-20 years will look like. And, so I really appreciate your advice, Dr. Vora. I know I have so many incredible mentors to look up to and role models like yourself that I know I can always reach out to. So I think every student or everyone should have like that support system that they build around them to ensure that they're making, they have that support in times where they need to take a step back. They need someone to tell them like, hey, it's okay, I'm here for you. Let's talk through this. Let's digest what's happening. Let's figure out a game plan. So really thank you so much, Dr. Vora, for doing this interview today and for sharing your journey, your advice and insights onto the space sector. I'm honestly so excited to meet you in person. I think we have so much in common. And so I'm very excited, but it was wonderful learning about your journey today. So thank you for taking your time to do this interview.
Thank you so much for inviting me to share my thoughts with your community. I hope we'll stay in touch. Come find me on LinkedIn, friends. If you've watched this recording and you reached out to me on LinkedIn, just let me know that that's where you know me from. There's so many random people on LinkedIn. I want to focus on the folks who are into the same things that I'm into. So just let me know and come follow me on all the socials. I'm on @TiffanyJ not TikTok because I'm old, but all the other ones you'll find me. And let's keep this conversation going and invite more people into it. I think the future is really bright and I'm really excited to meet you there.
Yes, I will link your social media handles down below. And I am also so excited to meet you in person and just keep this conversation going and looking for ways that we can collaborate together towards our common goals. So again, thank you so much. And I'm looking forward to meeting you in person.
Thank you.